So guess we're on the air here. We're on the air. Whether we want to be or not, we're on the air. I do want to say,
It's true, it's
before
happening.
we dig into this meaty Torah portion of Tzav, unintended, that I have my
Oh, that's good that you explained that.
live at Bethel, May 12th, 7 p.m., welcoming Henry Winkler
People are going to love
to the
him.
building, honoring Hal and Susan Hackerman,
Love them.
chaired by Dr. Joanna Marshall Reef.
Don't mess
Lama
that up.
Chatanam. Yeah, so it's looking forward to that. And we were doing a promo under the guidance of our producer, Jeremy, behind the glass.
And master scriptwriter.
Master scriptwriter. Master scriptwriter.
Tickets and
I would say the prose was Joycean.
Nice.
So that, anyway, that's the leather jacket. I kind of like the look. I think it works for me. I think it does.
It's a throwback.
I just need
something.
some grease in my hair, and then.
We could have done that.
So all of this is a roundabout way of kind of showing showing that Tzav is difficult to talk about, because here we are
We're procrastinating.
talking about leather jackets.
Live
at Bethel, May 12th.
Exactly.
May 12th.
tickets online.
Tickets
Buy your
online. Going
Okay.
fast.
We're going to do this. Let's jump. Okay, listen. Tzav. It's a Torah portion in Leviticus and Vayikra. And for those of you that have been following along with us, one of the things you probably notice is that we sort of go from like Genesis, which is like this very juicy, delicious stories that have such meaning, relevance in our lives, and sort of tell us the stories of our ancestors from the very beginning. And then we go to Exodus, which the first half is really filled with, again, like miracle after miracle, fascinating stories, and you get to some laws. And then by the time you get to Vayikra or Leviticus, you're really focusing on the details of ritual laws and practices that are going to sort of guide our ancestors, and some still guiding us today. And the narrative disappears, and it becomes a little bit more difficult. And one of the things that we were talking about just before we came online is that, when we're working with bar bat mitzvah kids on this, it's really challenging to find sort of something that's meaningful and relevant, and, that gives them something like juicy to hold on to. But I think that that's one of the challenges in both a difficult way and also a good way. And one of my favorite ideas that was ever shared about the book of Vayikra or Leviticus was Arnie Eisen at B'nai Jeshurun, probably, 25, 30 years ago. And it's funny, I remember it still to this day. He said something that along the lines of really, like he loved Leviticus, which I felt like outside of Ben Kreschel, no one really loves Leviticus. But he said that the reason that he liked it is that in some ways it reflects our lives much more so than the other books, that these other books are filled with these sort of like mountaintop miraculous moments. And he said Leviticus is like, in my head, it's sort of like a time to make the donuts, right? It's like just regular life, day to day, how we take care of the things. He's like, in my head, it's sort of like the dishes and the laundry and the like, what's for dinner? Like it's all of those things. It's not glamorous, but it's sort of the stuff that oftentimes makes up our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it is, I think, a lot of Leviticus is, and maybe apropos, since folks will be watching this. Jeremy, folks will see this Thursday morning, so a couple days before the Seders. That in large part, Leviticus is about Seder.
Yeah, order.
Order, yeah, not Seder like the Seder that you'll have for Pesach, but Seder, it's about order. And I think the priests in ancient times had this sense, if they could just get everything ordered the right way, that was a way to kind of open space for God's presence.
And it's an interesting thing that you raised, right? Because last week in the Torah portion, Vayikra, which was sort of the opening, we saw sort of an invitation, right? Like Exodus closes out with Moshe sort of like finishing up the building of the Mishkan, and it's like this great moment, and then God's presence comes, and fills it, consumes it, and like there's no room for Moshe anymore, right? And then in Vayikra last week when we opened, like the very first line was like an invitation for Moshe to like come,
Right.
to enter. And here I think one of the things that's that you just said that really resonated with me is that we are, or in Vayikra there is a lot of focus on order. And one of the things I think that we're seeing in the world today is the absence of order,
Yeah, for sure.
and I think that it has people feeling really tentative and worried,
Unsettled. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like when you have enough things in order, it feels like you can manage the uncertainties because there's enough that's standing firm.
Right.
And then in times where you feel like too much is unpredictable or unknown, it feels so unsettling. I think that there's this like murmur, if not like a buzz of
Yeah.
discomfort and anxiety almost.
For sure. Oh no, I think so. I mean, look at the stock market today. Last days, but I think very much so, and I think in part again the premise of the priestly sort of responsibility is to create that order,
Yeah.
bring that order. If you think about it, kind of at the end of the day, that's the purpose of ritual in general.
Yes.
Like ritual is about order. Shabbat comes every seventh day. You do this and you do that. When the Chagim come around, this happens and that happens.
Yeah.
And there's comfort in knowing that there's comfort in the sameness of it. Like
Yeah.
there's grounding in a way, regardless of
Yeah.
the fluctuations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
But the vicissitudes. But still, there's going to be this thing. It's always going to happen that way. It always has.
Yeah.
It always will.
I just want to notice that you use the word vicissitudes very like
Yeah.
casually in there. It was impressive.
I try to use it once a day. Use in a sentence. The vicissitudes of life must be faced with equanimity.
Just want to acknowledge that. Ooh, I love them. Equanimity, it feels peaceful. Okay. It's interesting to me that the first time that I realized or really tapped into what you were saying as a truth about human beings and human nature was I was struggling with the book Goodnight Moon.
Mm.
Remember that book?
Sure.
Sure. So
It was a favorite. Yeah.
by the way, it's funny. I feel like you're going to take out all those books soon.
Yeah.
That the Goodnight Moon, like it was so weird to me because the basic promise of Goodnight Moon is you can say goodnight to all of these inanimate objects because tomorrow morning they'll all be there just the same.
Mm.
And I think what I was really like, sort of what wasn't working for me in that book is that like we have front row seats to the reality is that like, don't be fooled by that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like every day there's a lot of room for things to actually be really different than they were when we closed our eyes.
100%.
But I do think that for children especially, and I think to your point, like also for adults, when we feeling that it's all going to be the same makes us feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. To know that despite the tremendous chaos in my life personally or in the world or whatever, this thing will happen.
Yep.
Like I can go I can go to shul, I'm going to hear this prayer, I'm going to say this.
Yep.
Like this will happen or whatever it is. And there's some comfort in knowing that there
Mm-hmm.
within all of that there's some sameness, steadiness. There are anchors.
Yeah.
There are
I love
anchors,
that word.
And I think those rituals provide us with anchors. I think the challenge in the material is it's sort of the danger of getting lost in the weeds. because there's a lot of weeds in Leviticus, speaking metaphorically, just so many details about the sacrifices. And Tzav continues that. We're working our way through the categories of sacrifices at the beginning of Parsha, how it's supposed to be sprinkled and how the animal's supposed to be cut up. And, one thing too, it's very, very detailed.
And what the Kohanim, what the people that were doing those offerings were supposed to wear and when they were supposed to shower and, or take tub, whatever. But
every detail.
Yeah.
What's always so fascinating to me about Leviticus, and it would, certainly. So with all of the details, right, and every facet of the ritual described, and in the whole book of Leviticus, and this was the religious system, right?
Yeah.
Never anywhere does it say, like, they recited this. They said a bracha. There's nothing about what was said. Nothing. It's really weird, actually. It's all about considering where Judaism ends up. Which is so verbal, And in Leviticus, not one. You would think with the whole instruction manual, if they were supposed to say anything, it would be there, but it's not. It's just like a weird thing.
Well, we do see that when we get to the parts about the Kohen Gadol and he would enter into the Holy of Holies, right? We do know that when he merges, there are things that Baruch Shem Kavod, right? That we would say, that they would say, and we would say. It was almost like a scripted experience. Yes. But to your point, and I think that this is really interesting about the Torah portion, is I think that gift giving was sort of like, I don't know if it was God's love language or the people's love language, right? So this is all about bringing gifts to God, right, because you've done something that you feel guilty for, you did something wrong, you sinned, because, you feel grateful that, you survived a life-threatening experience or you got over an illness, right? Like, or any of those things. Right. But I think that I don't know if it's us or God, but the love language in which we communicated was gift giving, and those were through the gifts that we brought with, that enabled a sacrifice to happen. And now I think it's words of praise. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that love language, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so in some ways, like, this was like a bloody and gory, and there was probably a ton of barbecuing outside, right? I mean, if you think about it, the Todah offering, which was to thank God. Nowadays, we actually do it, of course, when we say people come to shul to bench gomel, is around the Torah service, is a way of having an aliyah, and basically saying, like, God has been good to me and enabled me to survive something that felt life-threatening, and everyone wishes a blessing that God should continue to watch over the person that just had that experience. Yeah. But the Todah offering, you couldn't take like a doggy bag home.
Right.
By the way, great article in The Atlantic about how no one takes doggy bags anymore.
Really?
Yeah, as it turns out. I know, Jared. Well, actually,
I just did the other night.
Okay, I'm gonna pause for 1 second to tell you this, but I'm gonna go to the temple and then I'm gonna go here. So you couldn't take a doggy bag home. So what it meant is that you had to invite a lot of people, or you got to invite a lot of people to enjoy the meat of the offering with you. So I do always think, yeah. But let's go to the doggy bag for 1 sec, because it's fascinating. Okay, here's the doggy bag, according to Atlantic article, that people have stopped taking doggy bags, some of them because they're on dates. So that's sort of weird. I agree. No?
Depends where the relationship is.
Yeah. Early on.
You can, by the
first
way,
date, terrible idea.
You can, I think, look at two people on a date and know, like, that's a first date, that's a third date. And then you get into, like, they've been hanging out for a long time, and then, like, oh, they're married. Like, right?
Doggy bag and a coupon for my first date.
On your first?
Did not.
For my first date.
And she
Jill?
chose to marry
No,
you?
not Jill. Long before Jill.
Oh, on the first date.
It was the first and the last.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
And that was you or the date?
That was me.
So they say partly because people are going to restaurants and dates, partly because sometimes they're going out afterwards.
So what do you do with it?
Yeah. One is a little bit of the pandemic influence that, like, if people are sharing, it's a little germy thing now that people don't want to take home something that other people have shared. And the fourth is that for the younger generations, who you would think would be the ones to take home, they have easy access to Uber Eats and DoorDash, so they don't need to bring home food because they'll get, it's like replaceable. They get more food tomorrow. So the only people that are really taking doggy bags nowadays are families.
Well, I'll have to keep my eye on that.
And just watch
to
out.
see if there's anecdotal evidence to support that theory. We'll keep you posted.
Anyway, back to this.
But here they could. So no, it's in it because they could not take it.
No.
Because once it became a korban, which
Yep,
is
an
the Hebrew
offering.
word for sacrifice or offering, then it sort of was placed into a category of semi-sacredness, semi-holiness, and then you can't. You have to eat it within the precincts of Jerusalem, right? So it was a whole system. It's always one of these things, if you could go back in time. It'd be so fascinating. To just stand there and like watch it all work.
Oh.
How did it work and what was all that? It really would be. So.
I think it would be amazing. So this yesterday morning before my wedding, we were. Long story short, but Hillel. I don't know if Ezra told you this, Geller, but Hillel at Maryland hosts this unbelievable basketball tournament, and it's Jews from every college, like all over the place, and they're all able to, as I understood it, they're all able to put together their own teams. And
it's like intramural.
Yeah. But Duke's team was probably going to watch Duke play.
All the Duke fans out there.
Yeah, sorry. I know. I just gave you So Duke didn't have a team, so Gideon and his friends were able to like make a team and play like using Duke's pennies. But anyway, it was unbelievable. We went out, his game was at 9:30 in the morning on Sunday. And like, you just had these kids from like all over the country, but like there were Hebrew like letters of their schools of like Northwestern and Brandeis, Israel, Michigan, Pitt, I think ended up winning. Like it just was really fun. But I was thinking about that when you just said it, because in some ways it's like the gathering that has so much energy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was probably true also. Like when we go to visit the Kotel or where the temple used to be, like when you see it now, it's a place that we visit and we pray, but it used to be like the center of Jewish life.
Yeah.
You know, I'm imagining like it, like the smells and the tastes and like it really used to be.
Yeah, I remember the year that I lived in Israel, and I went down to the Kotel. It was for one of the Hagim. It might have been, I don't remember. Maybe it was Shavuos or maybe Pesach actually. But it's packed down at the Kotel on those days, and different minyanim form.
Yeah.
But there's just wall to wall people, and I remember being in some minyan and fairly close to the Kotel itself. And at a certain point, the priests got up to do duchening.
Which means the blessing that we say, the
priestly blessing.
Birkat
blessing. Kohanim, right. So there's a whole ritual around that, which we could get into maybe when we get to the priestly blessing itself. But I had this sense of, because that's so old, like, and it is the priests who did it. And just like being at the Kotel in that sense of, the sort of idea of sweeping something in to them, to the priests, and then their ability to sort of disperse it out, that energy, whatever it is. It was just it's something that I remember very vividly, very vividly. And that's part of what this, I think part of that experience for our ancestors in ancient times was just the kind of visceral, the vividness of it, to see that animal, which, by the way, was probably one of the most valuable things that you owned. That you would be, like I've said this, it would be like you think of some object that you have that is so valuable. You're, literally like a car or something like that. Yeah. And just saying, this thing which I need so much, which is so valuable to me, but I believe so deeply in this, I'm going to give it over to this priest and it will enable me to have a connection with God. Like,
And just to bear down a little bit on that idea, it wasn't like a campaign where people were invited to contribute something that felt significant. People brought sacrifices when they did something wrong and they felt guilty, when they sinned, when they felt like that. I'm going to use your word, like equanimity of like, everything is good right now. Those moments that you're sort of like, I just want to freeze time. Everyone is healthy. Everyone is in a good place. Like, and also, this Todah offering that we're reading about today, like they brought these sacrifices on occasions where they needed to feel, relieved of that guilt or relieved, you know what I mean? Or they needed a way to express their gratitude. And so it's so interesting, like the generosity that this
behind it.
must have.
Behind
Yeah.
it. Yeah. No, again, like
It's like a real pay it forward almost, like at least the Todah. Are we getting
a sign that,
okay, wait.
our taskmaster.
Because of that, any other like small snippets from this Torah portion that that you think are interesting? We have the Ner Tamid that has to stay lit all the time. We have those in our sanctuaries as reminders. And then you said that sort of this end. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the back end, I think you get into what's going to happen in terms of the priest's ordination. So for Aaron and his sons, and how that will happen with the oil and all that kind of business. And that's sort of so part of Leviticus is laying out, the rules, the rituals for the sacrificial system, and then part of it is sort of installing the priests as the ones who will enact the system, right? And so we're going to get into that a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
And
it's an interesting thing. I don't know, how you connect with it, but that Aaron and his sons would take the blood of the ram that they were sacrificing, and then they would take that blood and they would put some of the blood on like the ridge of their ear, and on sort of on their part of their thumb, and also on their big toe. Yeah. Like, what do you think about this?
There's an old midrashic, explanation of that, which is that they had to remind themselves to listen to the people. That's blood on the ear. To act on behalf of the people. That's blood on their thumb, on the hand. And then I don't remember why on the big toe, but it was another kind of
it was like a sort of a doing.
Right. Yeah, a doing kind of thing. And it's also interesting, and we can wrap up with this, that at times this material, as we said when we started the conversation, can be very difficult. It's obscure. It can be difficult to access. But it was also already for the Talmudic rabbis. Already they were struggling with this stuff, and that's why if you go to the midrashim around this material, the midrashim aren't dealing with the sacrifices.
Yeah.
It's all being understood already as a symbolic system in many ways.
Yeah.
So, all right, Rabbi Saroken, thank you as always. Jeremy, you're tough. Jeremy's tough, a tough minder. tough. And thanks everybody for listening.
Have a good Pesach.
Yeah, have great Seders. Enjoy your family and friends, and we'll see you next week.
Chag Sameach.